Good morning on this bright Sabbath day, Saturday, which is of course the Sabbath day. I agree with the Seventh-day Adventists that when the Sabbath day was forcibly moved to Sunday, that was a violation. I don't think Sunday is the Sabbath day. But unlike the Seventh-day Adventists, I don't believe any of the Old Testament regulations for the Sabbath day apply to us. Nevertheless, it is Saturday. It is the Sabbath day. And we are enjoying, I hope, an enforced Sabbath. So today I thought I would point out a few interesting connections or insights between the idea of the Sabbath and this theme that I'm exploring at the moment, waiting on God. Because in the Old Testament, the Sabbath day was a day for waiting on God. And once in a lifetime, there was a Sabbath year, a Jubilee Sabbath year. As well as that, there were supposed to be Sabbath years every seventh year, although it seems that the Israelites never really properly got round to observing a Sabbath year. The year of Jubilee, the day of Sabbath, they are about resting. They're about not just us having a rest. One of the interesting things about the Sabbath years and the year of Jubilee was that the land was to have a rest from us as well. There have been some remarkable photos and videos of various cities in the world which are suddenly almost pollution free. The water and the air are having a rest. They're having a Sabbath from the activity of human beings. I went out once to do some food shopping, and I noticed that the London sky was almost free of contrails. You know those high altitude condensation trails left by jet aircraft? I only saw one while I was out for an hour or two. How remarkable. Even the air is having a Sabbath rest. The land is having a Sabbath rest. There's no smog over a lot of our megacities, and the waterways are getting clearer. It's a Sabbath day, it's a Sabbath time, admittedly caused by unusual circumstances. I think in this world, Sabbath days and Sabbath years normally are impossible. We live in a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour society which is very impatient of any inefficiencies with regard to time use. And what could be more inefficient than a Sabbath day? Or even worse, a Sabbath year? Hopelessly unproductive. We live in a fidgety, hyperactive world. And I think to some extent churches have also become fidgety and hyperactive. I'm always hearing about exciting new initiatives from our denomination. And I'm sure every denomination has people at HQ sending out similar messages about exciting, new, innovative innovations or something like that, initiatives. Not very Sabbathy, is it? But I think of that marvellous Ecclesiastes quote from Ecclesiastes 7:8. The end of a thing is better than its beginning, and humility is better than pride. The end of a thing is better than its beginning. And here at the end of the week, we're meant to have a Sabbath rest, or at least we would have been under the old covenant. Now there's a great mistake which I've heard many times, is that for Christians the Sabbath has been abolished. Well, I don't think that's quite right. I think that for us the Sabbath has not been abolished, the Sabbath has been extended. The Sabbath is now a daily experience of resting in God. And I get that from Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews is that wonderful book of the Bible addressed to people who are Israelites by birth, Hebrews, but who are being challenged to live Christianly. And so the Old Testament, the Old Covenant is recast in new clothes. And what Hebrews does with the Sabbath is really interesting. I'm going to read from Hebrews chapter 4, talking about God's rest. Now we who have believed entered that rest, just as God has said, so I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. And yet his works have been finished since the creation of the world. For somewhere he has spoken about the seventh day in these words, on the seventh day God rested from all his works. Now the point he's making there is that the seventh day is still carrying on because God is still resting. He is not creating. The 6 days work has been done, and so God has a rest. He calls it my rest. And he says of people who disbelieve in him or disobey him, they shall never enter my rest. So here is God resting on the seventh day, if you like, of creation, which is a long period of time. But some people will enter it and some people won't enter that rest. So let me carry on. Therefore, since it remains for some to enter that rest, and since those who formerly had the good news proclaimed to them did not go in because of their disobedience, God again set a certain day, calling it today. So God, having set an original Sabbath day, now sets another day, and that is today. Whatever day of the week it is a potential Sabbath day. So he did this long ago when he spoke through David in the passage already quoted. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken later about another day. Now this is the important couple of lines. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. So here we have a permanent state of resting in God. Another day ordained by God, like Saturday. But this day is called today. Today we can enter into the Sabbath rest of God. Like God's own Sabbath rest, which has been carrying on for many, many years now, the seventh day of creation, we also can rest continually in God. This, I think, is related to what we saw in the book of Revelation with John saying that in the Lord's day he was in the Spirit. He was in the Spirit. And it is by being in the Spirit that we enter into God's rest. So many of us today have an enforced Sabbath. Enforced not by God, not by Moses, but by the government. So we're having a Sabbath season. Now, even if you're a key worker and you're busy out doing important work, when you go home, you'll find that an awful lot of your usual amusements are denied you. You can't pop out and see your relatives and friends. You can't go to church. You can't gather. You can't go to the football. You really are having an enforced Sabbath day. Well, my suggestion is make the most of it. Okay, it's a secular Sabbath. But for us who believe in Jesus, every day is a holy day. Every day is a holiday, a Sabbath unto the Lord. And so this Saturday and every other day, let's observe a Sabbath unto God. And let's take pleasure in it. I'm going to slightly misapply Isaiah 58 now, but I'm going to apply it to our current circumstances because I want to encourage you to enjoy, delight, waiting on God, resting in Him during this enforced Sabbath rest. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honourable, and if you honour it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride in triumph on the heights of the land, and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob. Have a blessed Sabbath, and may God fill you with joy and delight as you wait on Him. Bye for today.